This April, after a long Lent of contemplating the land and our relationship to it, the weekend after Easter, my husband and I took the time to tear up the sod in our front lawn and plant a garden of perennials, of things that grow food, of some native things, many pollinators. We took the time to tear it up and create a space where life could be. And in our backyard, we ran out of energy, so we cut the grass down to about 1 inch, which is not good for grass, but is excellent for clover, and we planted clover seeds. We spread them, watered them, let the sun and the rains and the sprinkler our kids love to play in do their work. And we watched as both the front yard and the backyard became full of life. The backyard, where the clover has grown, has 2 different kinds of clover, and we're seeing how they interact with each other. We're seeing how soft the clover feels on our kids' feet, how it makes a nice cozy bed when the toddler toddles and falls. We're seeing how bees come in and make our yard their home. We even have a few bunnies that are living under our shed and coming out to eat our clover and back under the shed to live their lives, to be sheltered. We mowed our grass down to 1 inch, we scattered the seeds, and something new began to happen in the land that we are living on. Today we've heard one story, and we'll hear another story of an event that took place, that started the wheels in motion for stories that are going and going and going, for clover that are blossoming and blossoming and blossoming, for pollinators and bunnies and hummingbirds that are coming and receiving nourishment, for stories that are still happening. Last week we talked about hinges of history, places where one thing is ending and another thing is starting, but we can't even tell what that thing is yet, but we have to step out into it. In many ways, me and my husband stepped out into a new way of living with our land. In many ways, the story of creation is God choosing to step into a new way of living, of being, that sets forth all of our being, all of the being of everything that has being. And it begins, much as my story of my garden begins, not with the words, "Let there be light," but with the brooding over the surface. God brooded. That is a word that is used for mothers gestating children, for particularly chickens gestating their babies. The Spirit brooded like a loving, sacred mother, father, parent beyond gender, brooded over the surface of the earth, much in the same way as my husband and I journeyed with the earth through Lent, and then gave birth to something, and then said, "Let there be light." And God says, "Let there be light," and it sets in motion a story that unfolds day by day or epoch by epoch and continues and continues and continues to this day. Rob Bell says, "What if it's not so important that the story of creation happened, but that it happens? The story of creation is happening today, and it began with somehow light came into being. And that light shined in the darkness, as we're told in John, and it is the source of all things." The clover growing in my yard grows there because somebody said, "Let there be light." The story continues. We walked off of one way of being into another, and when the moment the light appeared, it could never know where we would end up. But we keep continuing. New things keep happening. In a little bit, Liz Lang will talk to you about the events leading up to and following this church becoming affirming. She'll mention Bernice Burns. She'll mention a statement of affirming LGBT plus siblings, and empowering, not even just affirming, but welcoming and empowering and walking with and celebrating all of these things. And it begins, much as the story of creation begins, much as the story of my yard begins in Lent, with brooding, with Bernice Burns praying, wondering, what does it mean for her to be a tender of the light in her own soul, of the light that God shares with her? What did it mean for every person in this community to listen to and follow Spirit? And then that brooding gives birth to light. And it's an exciting time. And it's a moment where people were coming and being welcomed and stretching us. And some were afraid and some were excited. And as Chad said last week, it is an exciting time. A time to lean in, a time to wonder what might be. And through that time, this church became the first open and affirming church in our denomination. And now our denomination is overwhelmingly affirming. And now Seattle has many, many affirming churches. And it began with the brooding prayers of some people. It began with the listening. It began with the welcoming. And what I want to say is, in the same way as God said, let there be light, and there have been things created that could not have been thought of in that moment. When this church chose to be welcoming and affirming, that policy of being welcoming and affirming has pushed us again and again and again to wonder what comes next in this journey. It is that decision that I think makes us anti-ageist. I think it is that decision that makes us ask anti-racist questions. I think it is that decision that makes us anti-ableist. It is that decision that enabled me to say to you, let's use mums for worship so that if somebody has a swallowing disorder, they can participate in communion. God said, let there be light, and the story of creation began to unfold and unfold and unfold, and it is still unfolding now. And this church chose to be affirming, and that story began to unfold and unfold and unfold, and it is still unfolding now as we reach towards a future we don't know yet. This season, we are asking what it means to be stewards of the light amid the winds of change. And the winds of change are blowing much as they blew at the beginning of creation, much as they were blowing in the air in 1987. They are blowing around us. And sometimes it can be scary when those winds are whirring in your ears. Sometimes it can be exciting. Daniel Tiger says sometimes you feel two feelings at the same time. We can be scared and excited at the same time. This church has in its DNA the ability to not only live through times of change, but to join the newness that God is speaking into being. Our Christian faith has stories in its DNA of not only being able to live through times of change, but to hear the call of God to what is coming, to the newness that is being created in each moment. And so as we sit on the hinge of 2021 going to 2022, and we haven't even really caught up with what happened in 2020, we live in a time of change, a time where some of our members might be thinking about moving away, but they can stay connected through Zoom. One of our board members lives hours away, but joins us through Zoom and participates fully through Zoom. This is a different world. We have members for whom disability keeps them at home, but they are active members of our church because of Zoom. Who would have even known the word Zoom 3 years ago, right? And we are in a new neighborhood, relatively new to us, and the arts community in the neighborhood has new interest in our building, sending new emails asking, what can we do in your building? There is something happening, something new, something that might be, as Daniel Tiger says, two feelings at the same time, scary and exciting. The winds of change are blowing around us, and so we ask this year, what does it mean to be stewards of the light amid the winds of change? What does it mean to participate in stewardship in a time of change? And I invite you and I entrust to you that question for yourself. What does it mean for you and for us as a community to tend the light in a season of change? And as we say,